Given that the leader of the Conservative group last week said that none of us are experts in town centre management, has the leader of the council spoken to any experts in town centre management, and what they said about the way this council runs our town centres? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, at last week's council, the leader of the opposition made it clear that none of us were qualified to make any decisions unless we were experts in the subject being considered. I reject that notion completely, Mr. Mayor. Councillors are elected by the community to take decisions on their behalf, and the era of the 19th century, when only certain rich business people could run the towns, is thankfully long gone. However, I can tell Councillor Hickling that I was interviewed on Friday morning on Coventry and Warwickshire Radio about our decisions on car parking made that week. Interestingly, the BBC brought John Powell, an expert on town centres from Manchester Business School, into the discussion. He stated quite clearly that our parking charges were relatively low compared to other towns. He praised our decision to make parking free to encourage the evening economy as a very sensible solution. His words, not mine, Mr. Mayor. He also stated that it was the total town centre offer which was important, and I took the opportunity to remind listeners of our programme of events and entertainment which make us different from many other towns. Interestingly, CWR interviewed local residents using Rope Walk car park. All three respondents that morning thought our charges were very reasonable, and one of them stressed the fact that her car was in a secure car park, which was the main factor, adding that any small increase in charges was acceptable and would still leave our charges well below many other towns. So yes, Mr. Mayor, I have spoken to a qualified expert since that meeting, and he was fully backing of this council, as were the people who were interviewed on the radio. I would say, Mr. Mayor, we have got that recording if people don't fully believe my words on it.
Thank you. Are you filming again tonight, Claire?
Yeah, I emailed about it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know.
No, yeah, I did. After last week I did, yeah.
Okay. But you're not to turn it around to the public.
Oh, right, sorry. I'll chop that bit out then.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else filming tonight? There's two cameras on us tonight. Fine. Or TV and BBC. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has recently been announced that following consultation on the local government finance settlement, Warwickshire County Council has been given £2.99 million extra in its settlement. Warwick District Council has been given £40,000 extra. Stafford District Council has been given £40,000 extra too. The connection between the three councils is that they all made representations to the Department for Communities and Local Government during the consultation. Nuneaton and Bedworth received £21,000. However, North Warwickshire Borough Council, an authority half our size, also received £21,000. Residents would rightly wonder what is the difference between Nuneaton and Bedworth and our counterparts in Warwick and Stratford when we are the largest authority. The answer is simple. Nuneaton and Bedworth failed to respond to the consultation and so lost out on more money under the finance settlement. Could the leader of the council please explain why, under his leadership, this authority could not be bothered to reply to a consultation which could have seen us receiving a settlement on par with Warwick and Stratford had this authority done its duty and responded? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, the final local government finance settlement was eventually released on the evening of the 8th of February 2016, the latest I believe it's ever been done. As part of this publication, the Council did receive an additional £21,420 of funding in the form of a new transitional grant for each of the next 2 years. The actual amount of transitional grant receivable by councils was not allocated on the basis of any form of lobbying of government, neither should it be, and neither was it as a result of an application or response basis. However, this council did participate in a collective response to the draft finance settlement via the District Council network. The notification we received as part of the final settlement was that the transitional grant was issued to ease the impact of the reductions in revenue support grants to those most adversely affected. These are the government's words, Mr. Mayor. The reduction in revenue support grants incurred by this council between 2015-16 and 2016-17 is over £1 million. So they gave us a transitional grant of 21,000.
We never applied.
This is to lessen the impact of the cut of £1 million, Mr. Mayor. Further details regarding the exact formula for allocating this grant are being requested, but nothing has been received as of today from the Department of Communities and Local Government. I might add, Mr. Mayor, and these figures can be looked up quite easily, that the greatest amount of extra finance received by any authority was in Surrey, clearly an area of high deprivation, whilst most towns and cities received very little extra or none at all.
My question to the Cabinet Member for Planning and Development regards the proper use of public land which was set up in the late 19th century as the lodge for the caretaker for Austin Road Cemetery, whose duties at that time can only be imagined. The lodge was rebuilt in 1936, but the last caretaker, whose duties had been made redundant by more efficient procedures, was allowed to rent the lodge after his retirement about 20 years ago. Following the eventual vacancy of the property last year, a planning application was rapidly and unseemly presented for the building of 6 two-storey houses on the site to make a quick buck for NBBC, instead of being brought to the cemetery review as 300 much-needed burial plots following the failure of the Eastborough Way planned site. That usage would have been welcomed by the residents of Austin Road. While that planning application was rejected on January the 5th this year on the grounds of detrimental impact on the neighbouring property and the over-intensive nature of the development, it has been rapidly proposed for the same use with 5 two-storey houses instead of 6. Will the Cabinet Member for Planning and Development now ensure that this item is brought back for proper consideration by the Planning and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At its meeting on the 16th of February 2011, Cabinet resolved that the former tied tenancy properties, of which the Cemetery Lodge at Austin Road is one, be declared as no longer necessary in terms of operational need and hence surplus to requirements. That same Cabinet report made it clear in its overall tone and content that declaring the identified properties surplus to requirements would allow the Borough Council to obtain both capital receipts at various points in time in the future and also to obtain a revenue income stream for a number of years. The proposal to build new homes on the site of the lodge complies with the resolution and intention of the report and, as importantly, delivers some much needed housing within the borough. I am clear that the decision to submit a planning application was carefully considered, and given that it was submitted some 10 months after the council received the keys for the lodge, I cannot accept that this was rapid or unseemly. Perhaps Councillor Foster would like to propose this site for a shopping mall development instead of the long shoot as he announced last week. In relation to the use of the land for burial plots, I'm advised that the number of plots that would be available is between 270 and 300. Whilst I recognise that land needs to be identified for burials, this land does not make economic sense for our council taxpayers. The provision of these additional plots would generate an income of between 102 and 113,000. However, this needs to be offset against an approximate cost of 40,000, which will be required to clear the site and make it appropriate for burials, along with costs of upwards of £5,000 to conduct the archaeological survey that the County Council has requested. This is a delicate balance between need and financial feasibility, Mr. Mayor, which needs to be struck, and I'm satisfied that officers have sought to action the original intentions of the Cabinet resolution in 2011.
Thank you.
For Ian Lloyd, portfolio holder for Culture and Leisure. From debates at this council and on social media, it seems clear that some councillors are under the mistaken opinion that the Bedworth Civic Hall just about breaks even. The most recent quarterly performance report shows that the forecast variance for the Civic Hall is £32,000 over budget. Looking at last year's accounts, it seems that the total expenditure at the Civic Hall is around £1.5 million, while the total income is around £900,000. The net budget for the Civic Hall is the expected difference between these two figures. This cost will fall upon the taxpayers and surpluses from rip-off hiking parking charges, I'm sure. My understanding is that the 2015-16 budget for the Civic Hall is £650,000 and the latest expected outturn is £682,000. That is, the total income will be £682,000 less than the total cost. The £32,000 overspend is an overspend on the £650,000. £682,000 represents a cost of around £13 for every household in the borough. This uncontrolled spending does little to benefit the council taxpayers we represent. Why are you failing to control this overspend, and why are you failing to increase the income of the Civic Hall?
Like Groundhog Day, isn't it? And I've got to say that, well, first of all, Councillors Conductor, I would like the appropriate title. First of all, Councillor Conductor, I hope you have a lovely holiday, because obviously you was greatly missed from the full council. Taking that to one side, I think I answered the question fully previous, and I've got to say, Mrs. Wayne's question made more sense. Thank you.
You, Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for the Cabinet Member for Planning and Environment. Can Councillor Aldington inform me if the County Council have withdrawn the land off Eastborough Way that they put forward for development through the Borough plan process? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the Borough plan process, this council has to, on a regular basis, put out a call to sites, which is where landowners for pieces of land across the borough are asked whether they want to submit this land to be included in the borough plan. As members will know, the borough plan is not just about housing, but also includes lands for employment and land for gypsy and traveller sites, as laid down in the government's National Planning Policy Framework. I can tell Councillor Tandy that despite reports to the contrary, the County Council, for it is they that own the land off Eastborough Way, have not withdrawn it from inclusion in the borough plan. The leader of the County Council had been quoted as saying that they will not sell the land to the Borough Council. Well, Mr Mayor, I hate to break it to Councillor Second, but the Borough Council does not buy up land put forward by landowners, nor could we afford to due to the savage cuts laid down on us by her government.
You, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, could you please note that my question is a question, not a speech disguised as a question. Mr Mayor, having attended the last meeting of the Cabinet, could I ask if there is any truth in the aspirations of the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Group to build a shopping mall, like Maryhill, off the Longshoot Nuneaton? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, I can tell Councillor Hancock's quite categorically, which he knows as he was present, that at last week's Cabinet meeting, the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Group, Councillor Foster, stated quite clearly and unequivocally that a Maryhill-style shopping centre should be built at the top end of the Longshoot instead of houses. I reminded him that the long-held policy of this Labour-controlled council is not to allow out-of-town shopping complexes, which threaten the very existence of our town centres. The residents of St Nicholas Park and the Longshoot can therefore rest assured that whilst Labour is in control of this council, no such development will be taking place, will be encouraged, no one will be agreeing with the views of the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Didn't they say that about them?
Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for the Leader. Does the Leader agree with the statement made by the Conservative Deputy Leader at last week's Cabinet that the Council have not made enough employees redundant?
Mr Mayor, I can assure Councillor Copeland that I do not agree with the Conservative Deputy Leader, Councillor Foster, that the Council have not made enough employees redundant. Councillor Foster made his clear statement of opinion at last week's Cabinet meeting and repeated it when challenged. I did at the time point out there were officers in the room who, compared with 2010, now work to do the jobs previously done by 2 or 3 officers. Since 2010, 103 employees have been made redundant. This was partly achieved by voluntary severance, but there have been a number of compulsory redundancies which were largely forced on us in a situation of diminishing resources caused by the savage cuts which I've spoken about in government grants. The Deputy Leader of the Conservative group clearly wants more people to be made redundant. I can assure the Council that the controlling Labour group's aim is to preserve jobs and services. Any further redundancies will be a direct result of the cuts being forced upon us and not by any wish to do so on our part.
Thank you. Present the report.
However, I do have to say, Mr Mayor, that well, I do complain sometimes about the address. It's one upon learning in the council chamber where we tried to get enough space in my papers last week and brought it out. So the Nuneaton Bedworth council chamber is one of which we can prepare. I would like to just very quickly, Mr Mayor, refer to this. We're happy to answer any questions. It has been through various stages of discussion, but again, centres largely around the difficulties we've had with finance.
Anyone have any questions? Councillor Concord. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I had a very nice time climbing some hills and being de-stressed from this fishbowl of stupidity. Anyway, on a more practical note, on page 37, we mentioned the car parking review as 3A. It talked about full comprehensive debate and things. But one thing we didn't do was actually tell people how much you expected to raise from the parking. And also the consultation was actually reviewed in just one day. So on the Monday, the council produced a full report in everyone's consultation responses. What do you consider this a proper consultation if the whole of the consultation responses was reviewed in just one day? Thank you.
Quite simply, Mr Mayor, if the council officers took one day to actually review all the few responses we had, then we might be looking at why they're still employed, because I think it could have well been done within an hour or two. There were so few responses received, Mr Mayor.
My second question is on item 5, which was the meeting on the 2nd of December, when the climbing wall fiasco was discussed. At the time, it was mentioned we were going to try and keep on the employees and retrain them. Does Councillor Ian Lloyd now recognise it was a mistake and it would have actually destroyed the Play Rangers service as a result of the mistake in buying the play wall?
I'm getting deja vu all over the place. I think that question's already been answered quite substantially. And I wish you'd been here, but if you've got anything to say on that, Ian, please do. Unless you want to refer to the previous answer. I was listening in, there's somebody else was.
I'll repeat it again, Mr. Mayor. They haven't been made redundant, they chose to be made redundant. They asked to go, and it's not diminishing, it's a part of the sports development. So it's 3 for 2.
Anybody else got any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with interest, my question is regarding, again, page 37.3, the revised off-street parking. And I think, my question is going to have to change slightly in the light of what the leader said about the fact that he heard the guy on the radio that was fully supportive. It's quite clear that the leader is stating that the price increases that the council's put in were something that this individual supported and agreed. If that's not the case, then he should obviously clarify that now. Otherwise, when we all listen to the recording, he might find himself in a very awkward position. But that was very recently that he was on the radio, and this cabinet decision was some time before that. So I'd like to know then, before he had the benefit of hearing somebody on the radio, what made the leader think that he and the cabinet knew so much better than the real experts, our local traders, national chains and shopping centre managers, all of whom urged and appealed to the council not to put up parking charges?
Well, Mr. Mayor, the vast majority of retailers in Nuneaton and Bedworth did no such thing and did not respond in such a way. Just for Councillor Drummond's information, this is actually Councillor Ardington's portfolio. Councillor Ardington put forward the report. It was made quite clear from the opposition last week that none of us know anything unless we are a so-called expert. And there I was presented with an expert on the Friday morning that I knew nothing about this man coming. He was from the Manchester Business School, no axe to grind, and you're quite welcome to listen to the recording. I would have asked Mr. Mayor to actually ask earlier if it was possible to play it in the chamber, but I was told it's not really the done thing. But you can all listen to it, you can all hear, and you could have all phoned CWR, Mr. Mayor. I've got nothing more to say about it.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, the people on the ground, who are the local shoppers and traders, take a different view, and as much as I would like to welcome the man from Manchester and Nuneaton are completely different. My question is to either leader or the planning portfolio, or I don't mind who answers it. There were a number of responses in the consultation document which represented both medium and small, and in fact large retail chain stores. Does he neglect to consider the amount of jobs that those employees and those businesses represent, and the effect that the impact on car parking charges could have on those jobs and the viability of those traders continuing in our town centres? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Who wants to do that one? So the last question on car parking was we had 2 hours last week on this, and we settled the matter, and I'll get into it more with the whole thing now.
Mr. Mayor, I can say exactly the same thing. It's been to Cabinet twice. We debated it fully last week in here, where all sides, if they were here and not climbing rocks, were available to speak. I'd just like to say, though, Mr. Mayor, that there are 371 businesses in Nuneaton, and less than 50 responded to that consultation. Thank you.
Has anybody got a question on something different?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Final question. The news, item 4 on page 37, the funding for the miners' welfare and the sports pavilion is absolutely marvellous. And we've had absolutely marvellous news at the football club in Bedworth as well, where they've got the 3G pitch. Will the portfolio holder be helping out pavilions in Nuneaton, which are in a sorry state of repair?
Councillor.
Groundhog Day again. Mr. Mayor, it's quite simple. As was stated by the chairman of the Bedworth Cricket Club, quite annually approached Councillor Condacourt at the meeting and stated that it was him. It was him and the people of Bedworth Cricket Club, the same as the people at the Harriers, the same as the people at Wembrook School, the same as the people at Alderman Smith School, the same, I can go on forever, Chair, forever. All the projects that have come forward has one thing in common. They're local councillors and the people that run those clubs approached Nuneaton and Bedworth Sports Development, or at the time with some of them, Nuneaton and Bedworth Leisure Trust. And at the end of the day, it's down to, we can't get the funding without the groups. We will assist in any way we can. But it's them that actually go out, get the paperwork together, put in for the grants, and come to us and say we want assistance, that get it. And unfortunately, that's the way of the world. We haven't got the money. You've heard tonight, you've seen the budget, you've heard about redundancies, you've heard about services that have to be trimmed back or amalgamated with other organisations. I said, we haven't got the money. And it's due to one thing. Do I have to keep saying it? Do we all have to keep saying it? If you want to point the finger or blame the Conservative cuts. They're the people that are to blame for it all. If you want these services coming to your area, then you need to get those organisations organised and putting in the forms. And they have been all over this borough. And if you look at the figures, and I haven't got them on me, but I will get them, and if you look at the figures, the vast majority of them have been in Nuneaton. Not Bedworth, not Pilkington, not Kersley Village. They've been in Nuneaton. The vast amount of money that has been coming into this borough has come into Nuneaton. Not Bedworth, not Pilkington, not Kersley Village. So it is about, at the end of the day, the people coming to us, asking for help, and we will, wherever we can, giving time, and hopefully without the cuts, try and help them. You was told this, not just by me, but by the chair of the Bedworth Cricket Club. But you didn't want to hear it. So I'll sit down at that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hancock.